Không giúp biết các bạn. Okay, I'm fine. Thank you for coming. Chào các bạn. Hope you're enjoying all that good food that those community members made for you. And that's a little better. Welcome to the Cambodian Buddhist temple. My name is Joyce Wong. And first, we'd like to introduce Khmer Nan, campaign director at Mekong, New York City.
Hello everyone, Khmer Nan, campaign director at Mekong University.
And to start our session today, I'd like to introduce the two monks at the temple. And if you could please say hello. Dekong Tapakorn Gosadamo and Piku Kandal. Yes.
Good afternoon and welcome to you all. We are very happy to see you all. First of all, I would like to say I'm sorry for being not good at English, but I say what I can. Welcome to you all. Thank you and very appreciate for all good deeds you have done in your life for others. On behalf of the monks here and all the devotees here, today I had a great opportunity to see you all and talk to you all. I have heard that you came here to learn something. So let me ask you, what is the value food? What is the food you have eaten? What is the taste of Khmer food?
It's delicious.
Thank you.
Yeah, delicious. I hope that we do the good taste of food for you all, but I think even it's bad, we cannot say bad, right? But you know, bad and good are meaningful. You cannot do something bad all the time, and you can learn from the bad. You cannot do good all the time, but you can learn from the good. Right? This is the realities in our life, in our world. The taste of Cambodian food you cannot find or easy to find in market. Only at the temple. So please come here if you want to taste the Cambodian food. My name is Piku Kandal. I am the board of this temple. I used to be here for many years. In 2001, I used to be alone for many years and to provide Buddhist services and Cambodian services to Cambodian people. And this temple found in 1985 by the first generation of Cambodian refugees. We practice here Buddhism, and we also preserve Cambodian cultures. And we use this house as a worship house, a place we can come together, we can unite, and we can do something good for us together. Cambodia used to be empire and used to be colonized by France about 100 years, and lately invaded by Vietnam. Cambodia used to be a dead nation. The scholars were killed, the temples were destroyed, and the innocent people also killed. About 3 million people were died by killing. It is very sad. And now still killing and killing. So we have this temple to practice, to be peaceful, to practice, to be calm, to practice not to kill, not to be violent. And basically we practice 5 precepts. Not to kill any living being, not to steal any belonging of others, not to commit adultery, not to tell a lie, and not to take intoxicant. We believe that this is the nature of human being, a full nature of human being. And to practice this, we have to fight against our enemies. There are a lot of our enemies, but the most important is only 3 kinds of our enemies in our life. One is not to be angry. 2 is not to be greedy. 3rd is not to be evil. When you do not kill any living beings, you love. You feel compassionate. You have compassion, you have love. You open heart, open arm to others, and we can live with each other peacefully, happily. Killing is violence. So do not kill. And they live with the small or big, animal or human, do not kill. And this precept not to kill any living being, including animals, small animals, the cockroach or rats. Do not kill. You love them, you control them by some way, do not kill. Do not steal. When you steal, you have no peace. And you are not happy. And yourself, your family, and the community do not like. So do not steal. No matter what, do not steal and belonging to our people. And do not commit adultery. You have a wife, you have girlfriend, boyfriend, you have husband. Do not cheat on each other. Do not commit adultery. You are peaceful. You are happy. Do not tell a lie. When you tell a lie, it will see fake. And you cannot live with that, with faith. you have a lot of problems, and especially the country. No one need the faith. You do not tell a lie. Do not take intoxicant. When you take intoxicant, you no longer feel normal. You confuse, you spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of money, and finally you destroy your life without thinking. So this is the basic concept we practice in Buddhism. To be happy, to be peaceful, and to live together with love, with compassion. We are Buddhist monks. We are Buddhist people. We practice there, but we do not have influence on politics, on politicians. And the politics and politicians decide what to do, decide to listen for ourselves, for the world. So you are educated, you are higher educated, millions of people depend on you. Millions of people need services from you, and you have a high quality to provide people to be treated well, to cure, or whatever you can do. I saw that in pandemic, COVID, some nurse and doctor, they care for their patients. They love their patients, they cry, they could not do anything to help them. And I see that is the great qualities of doctors and nurse people like you. And very appreciate for you to be a higher educated people and then provide all the great service to the people. And now, because we do not have vision, especially the politicians, they don't have really vision. They hate each other. They use violence sometimes, and the war bigger and bigger in the world now. The hate cannot be ended by hatred. Violence cannot be ended by violence. So violence cannot be ended by peace. Only one way to have a beautiful world, a better world, the world we can live together, is to observe purposes, not to kill, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to tell lies, and not to take intoxicants. You see, the world now, especially in Palestine, a lot of people have been killed every day. And now Lebanon also die every day. And not only one side, both sides, they kill each other. But the one who had the most powerful weapon killed a lot more. And how do we stop? How do we stop the violence? How do we stop the war? Everyone depends on USA. Right? USA is the way to stop or not stop the war or violence in the world. So you live in USA, you also work in USA. I think you can do something. You can spread the peace. You can spread the happiness for all. Or you can do whatever you want. You take a great education. Or you can do, I think, for me, only blessing all of you, only blessing all other people, also can provide some education or tourism to make people understand and live the life with happy and peace. Live with others, do not live only ourselves, our family, we cannot. You know, we were born here and we die. We are not permanent. Everything is not permanent. Everything decays and dies somewhere, sometimes. So only one way we have to do is to do the great thing for ourselves and for others. To observe like Bishop spread the way to live with peace, happiness to other worlds. To other worlds. When you have vibration, when you observe vibration, you are peaceful in yourself and also make people around you peaceful and happy. Thank you very much again for coming and listening what I would like to talk today. Thank you, very appreciate the joy.
As a clinician who's dedicated a lifetime to understanding and supporting survivors of genocide and trauma, particularly with the Cambodian refugee community here in the Bronx, I come to you today with deep grief and profound anger at the ongoing genocide currently unfolding in Palestine as of 1 year ago. The patterns of trauma, forced displacement, and intergenerational suffering that I've witnessed in the Cambodian refugee community are tragically not just a part of history, but a horrifying reality playing out before our eyes today in real time. As healthcare professionals, we bear a unique responsibility, not only to treat traumas, the effects of traumas, but to recognize and speak out against the conditions that cause it. These patterns don't just merge in times of war. They manifest in our society with forms of systemic violence, including anti-Blackness, that drives mass incarceration, police brutality, deportation, and structural oppression. These issues are not distinct. They are deeply connected by a shared disregard for human life and dignity. Silence in the face of suffering is complicity. Our roles demand that we advocate, we use our voices, that we act to prevent the cycles of violence and trauma from continuing. Our work is not just about healing individual wounds, but about challenging the conditions that cause them. Our commitment to health and justice compels us to stand together against violence, whether it's state-sanctioned brutality down these mean streets here, or abroad during times of genocide and war. So, starting this presentation, I just wanted to play a brief snippet of a doctor. Her name is Dr. Saman Jambar, and she's a Palestinian psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and writer. since 2016, she was the head of the mental health unit at the Palestinian Ministry of Health, and has written columns about the psychological consequences of Israeli occupation in Palestine since the 2000s. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to play her oath. And it's an oath as a healthcare and mental health professional that I thought was poignant in these powerful times to listen to as a group. Just give me 1 minute. Can we turn off the beacon? Thank you. Thank you. Let's see if I should get this now.
Nationalism seeks to erase.
Start from the beginning.
In the spirit of justice and the quest for freedom, I take this oath as a mental health professional and a doctor. I vow to stand firmly against all forms of colonialism, racism, oppression, and exploitation, recognizing that my role is not merely to treat symptoms, but to challenge the systems that dehumanize and subjugate. I will never be complicit in or silent about acts of torture, and I will expose all forms of oppression and injustice. I will hold sacred the dignity, culture, and history of every individual and community I serve, striving to heal the wounds inflicted by oppression and supporting the reclaiming of identity and agency that colonialism seeks to erase. I will listen with deep respect to those who have been silenced, ensuring that their voices guide my actions and decisions. I will amplify their calls for justice, standing beside them in solidarity. I will foster the collective healing of traumatized communities, understanding that true restoration requires the mending of both the personal and the social fabric. I will advocate for justice and work to transform the conditions that perpetuate suffering and despair. I will honor the courage and resilience of those who resist oppression, recognizing their struggle as a vital and healthy response to injustice. I will reject any attempt to pathologize their resistance, upholding their right to fight for their freedom and dignity. I will conduct myself with humility and a commitment to unlearning biases and assumptions that may cloud my professional judgment. I will seek wisdom from those who have endured the weight of colonialism and oppression, allowing their experiences to shape my practice. I will learn from the experiences of liberated peoples and continue to develop my knowledge and expertise in serving the causes of justice and liberation. In all these endeavors, I will not use my profession as a tool of control, but as an instrument of liberation and healing. I will dedicate myself to the pursuit of justice, freedom, and dignity for all, until the chains of oppression are broken and every human being can live with honor and peace. Thus, I commit to uphold this oath with unwavering resolve throughout my professional journey, wielding my strength and passion to forge a more just and humane world. This is my promise, my invocation of liberation. Oath of Mental Health Prophet.
So, as I mentioned, it's hard not to acknowledge and talk about what's going on in real time about the genocide in Palestinian, particularly because you're in a Cambodian temple, and I feel like it's a safe space. I'm talking amongst family, and maybe perhaps you don't have to agree, but I thought it was very relevant because our talk is about the Cambodian community and the effects and impact of mass violence and genocide. So to start out, maybe we could just go around and introduce ourselves and your family practice, pediatrics or internal medicine.
I'll start first. I'm Lottie Oki. I'm family medicine coordinator.
I'm Caroline. I'm a social pediatrics intern.
I'm Sonia, social internal medicine, she, her.
I'm Karen, social internal medicine.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm also internal medicine.
I'm Nisha, internal medicine.
Welcome.
Ashley, also internal medicine.
I'm Samaya, family medicine.
I'm Renee. I'm also family medicine.
Leah, family medicine.
Sherry, family medicine.
Michael, family medicine.
Minnie, family medicine.
I'm Danish, Data, internal medicine.
Julianne, family medicine.
Nisha, social peds.
Maya, pediatrics.
Davis, family medicine. I'm Steven, family medicine.
I'm Leah, internal medicine. I'm Stephanie, family medicine.
I'm Omar, I'm from internal medicine.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm social peds.
Thank you. And so before starting, this is a lot of material to cover. It's over 40 years when Lottie, we've been doing this presentation for the residents here at the temple for at least over 10 years. And it's a lot of material to go through. And so forgive me if it's a little fragmented and it's here over there, but it's just a lot to cover. And so let me just start. So first I want to take a moment to recognize the profound impact who is the former executive director of Mekong, New York City. Her name is Chaya Chow. She was a founding member and former executive director of Mekong, New York City. Her dedication and vision established the foundation on which the organization stands, paving the way for all of us. Her legacy lives on, guiding the work that we do. And she's now the current executive director of the Southeast Asian Freedom Network. And then I would like to acknowledge the staff currently from Mekong, New York City. She's over there in the end. Her name is Sochita Meng. She's the executive director of Mekong, New York City, whose leadership carries forward this important mission that ensures that Mekong, New York City continues to serve our community with the same passion and integrity. And one of the other staff, Anna Srey, she's a lead Cambodian organizer. And then you met Cameron,
Yes.
the campaign director. And I also wanted to share a little bit of my own personal background that brought me to the work I've been doing over 3 decades as a social worker, and been based at the Family Health Center, which now is based on One Fordham Plaza, but originally was it was the first. Now we have a medical group. How many medical groups are we? They're like 20?
20, something like that, yeah, probably 50, 20, yeah.
Right. When I started over 3 decades ago, it was like maybe 2, and the Family Health Center was one of the first ambulatory care clinics in the Bronx. I'm a native New Yorker, raised in the inner city of Washington Heights to immigrant working poor parents. I'm Chinese and Puerto Rican. I'm not Cambodian. Developing a strong social justice consciousness, like many other immigrant children from very early on. My parents and I helped my parents and the neighbors with translations from as early as age 9. I'm sure I'm sure many of you in the room also might have these experiences as well. My father was a cook, but I would also accompany him door to door selling Chinese slippers and little pocketbooks. And my father didn't speak Spanish, and his English was very limited, so I would translate for him door to door. And then I completed my master's degree in social work and was offered a position at Montefiore Hospital, providing mental health services to Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees here in the Bronx. I had never worked with an Asian community, let alone a Southeast Asian community. I didn't know where Cambodia was on the map. I didn't know about the history of genocide. I didn't know about the history of war and displacement. But I decided to take it, and I said, oh, I'll work in the Bronx for a year or two, then I'll move on. And it's over 30 plus years now, so I would say it's a lifelong commitment and calling. So that's how I started. And one of the women that you met, Usara, who's integral and part of this work that I've been doing. She's the mental health worker, and she is a Cambodian refugee. She left, she wasn't feeling so well. Usually she's part of this presentation as a community member, but also as a mental health worker who's been working for 36 years with the community and came to the Bronx as a refugee herself. She would start to make some remarks. So I'm just going to make her remarks as if it was her, because I think her voice, I serve the Cambodian community, but I'm not Cambodian, and think it's very important to preserve the voice of community members that you can actually hear. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay. My name is Usara Sapok. I am a Cambodian refugee. I was resettled to the United States in 1986 as a survivor of war and mass violence after experiencing the Cambodian genocide from 1975 to 1979. During the Khmer Rouge genocide regime, also known as the killing fields, the average number of traumas a Cambodian refugee has experienced is 16, from starvation, forced labor, separation of family and friends, torture, bombings, witnessing of killing, combat situation, mass rape. The Khmer Rouge had a saying, which was to destroy you is no loss. During those 4 years of the regime, all of our culture was lost. From a population of 7 million, between about 3 million people died. After the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia in 1979, at the age of 19, my family and I escaped from Cambodia to Thailand and lived in a Thailand refugee camp for 5 years doing nothing. I wanted to share part of my personal journey with you so that you could get a little understanding of what it means to be a refugee and can be aware of patients' traumas and provide more services and effective treatment. Thank you. So, how many of you knew about the Cambodian community in the Bronx? Okay, one person out of 25. Yeah. So, the Cambodian refugees were resettled into urban poverty in the Bronx starting in the 1980s and 1990s, as Sarah mentioned in her remarks, due to a genocide that killed between 1 and 3 million people. From 1975 to 1979 due to U.S. militarism, and the average number of Cambodian refugees has experienced is 16, from which we mentioned from starvation, forced labor, separation of family and friends, witnessing of killing. Significant persistent rates of medical and mental health disorders exist as a result of past war traumas, as well as ongoing current systemic disparities and inequities because of the lack of access to health and mental health care due to language barriers, structural racism, poverty, policing, mass incarceration, and deportation. So when I started at the clinic at Montefiore in 1989, the first wave of Cambodian refugees was being resettled in the Bronx. And so about over 500, after the war, after the genocide in Cambodia, about over 500,000 refugees were resettled around the world. And about 150,000 in the United States. And one of the areas was the Bronx. And so you think of being resettled in the Bronx after going through 4 years of a genocide, and the average number of years community members lived in a refugee camp before being resettled here in the Bronx was 5 to 10. So imagine then coming into the Bronx into urban poverty. There was a big resettlement failure by the United States government and resettling Cambodian refugees here in the Bronx into poverty without the appropriate resources. And so it was mostly women and children, and the clinic was right on 193rd Street. And so has anybody been to our clinic on One Fordham Plaza? Okay, that building is right on One Fordham Plaza. It's a state building on the 5th floor. It's really not accessible as a walk-in primary care clinic in a community setting. So our original clinic that was there over 25 years was right in the middle of all residential buildings where Latinos, African Americans, and Cambodian refugees were resettled. So imagine you being a Cambodian refugee that has gone through all these horrors. And typically when people are resettled, the model of care has been food, clothes, and shelter. But there's never, the old models of care at least are not focused on mental health care. It's all food, clothes, and shelter. So bringing a community of people and coming into this neighborhood, expecting them to access, even though it was right across the street from our clinic, expecting them to access health and mental health care. And not to mention, Dan is there. Dr. O'Connell is here. He's on Zoom.
So we wanted Dr. O'Connell.
Yeah, maybe he could say something. Actually, that's good timing, Dan.
So Dr. O'Connell, for those of you who don't know, he's a family medicine physician. He worked at the Family Health Center, for decades, and he was one of the providers who was caring for a lot of the population as well. And so he's always been here as part of this visit. He's right now canvassing for the election. It's just so he couldn't join us today.
North Carolina.
But he can bring a lot of that. So we wanted to let him also be able to add just the history he brings from doing the work as well and kind of working with his community. So, can you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Barely. So should I talk real loud?
Yes, louder.
So let me just say, I think what's been really amazing about the Southeast Asian Mental Health Project, right? And I guess the 90s and thousands and 2010s, right? Working with all the different populations in the Bronx. When you had patients who've been through traumatic genocides, basically, and when you had a team like Joyce and Osra, who really took a holistic approach to each patient, knowing their cultural history and really integrating them. And just as a family doctor caring for folks in the community, it's just been amazing to see the teamwork that Osra and Joyce have done in caring for folks really dealing with incredible trauma. And just as primary care doctor, this is kind of the social medicine model where you want to be able to practice it, where you can be their doctor, but you can't really care about those deep things. And it's been nice to have that. And I know it's also, I don't know how much Joyce is supposed to talk about it. It's a struggle over the years to get support of different folks in the institution. There have been, I think in the psychiatry department, Joyce has mentioned especially, have been supportive of her work for many years to keep that going. So I just want to acknowledge that this is excellent social medicine model that they practiced all of these years. Also, though, I think in the 80s, there were some residents who were involved in community surveys in the neighborhood right around the big C. And again, it was all nice embedded in the neighborhood. I think CHCC is a little more embedded in the neighborhood than, let's say, Port Plaza or Williamsbridge is. But just FHC, the model of being embedded in the neighborhood, doing community surveys, and teasing out community needs. Again, a good approach for social medicine, and especially being able to integrate a community worker and a mental health worker with the medical work. Joy, I don't know if there's any other comments about that?
No, just maybe some comments as what it's been like for you as a doctor and working with a community really that you started working with as a resident also, and you've been with them through the life cycle from the beginning, since they were resettled and now as older adults.
Yes, and especially I'm thinking of several patients who've had really incredible trauma, and for many of them the trauma was right when they were 20 years old, their family members were killed in front of them, or two of their children died, or their first husband was killed, etc. And then they kind of built second lives in refugee camps and coming to New York. So folks who just had that really incredible amount of trauma, and but just as a doctor, they just kind of need a lot of kindness, basically. But that's really not enough. You kind of be aware of what people's experiences of authority and work with them. And as I say, having we had Cambodian translators at HC in the 90s, so having them in the room helped a lot. It's a little bit better in many of these situations than having the telephone translators. That was another whole issue in the 90s and 2000s about having in-person translators who are also in many ways community workers. And also generationally, right? There's a lot of generational issues in trauma. The next generation both carries on the trauma, they'll also have resilience as well. I think of the analogy of survivors of the Holocaust in Germany in World War II, and how the next generation kind of carried the trauma, but also then started defining their own story. And same with the Cambodian community, that there's many folks who had parents who had these sort of traumatic lives before they were born, and they kind of grow up in the echo of that. And obviously that just affects everybody in many different ways, but it's, I think, good to be aware of the historical context. We have many different immigrant communities in the Bronx. Every community kind of has a different story of the migration story and how that impacted the family. I think of Bengali and Yemeni and West African as more recent immigrants, and this Cambodian community has this particular story as well. I don't know, Joy, are there any other thoughts on it?
Thank you, Dan. If anybody wants to comment on anything Dan said. No? Okay. Thank you so much.
But let me just say,
Yes.
being aware of history and thinking why people's moved from one place to another, I think helps anchor you in patients' lives and sort of how they're rebuilding their family structure here in New York as well.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
How's it going over there?
How's it going? There's one door knock at a time.
So as I was, oh, he's still on. Okay. So as I was saying, when the Cambodian community was first resettled and they had this primary care clinic, but you could have a primary care clinic right in front of you and not access health care or mental health care. And particularly for myself, who didn't know anything about the Cambodian community, having the mental health worker who was there a year before me and establishing a very solid relationship with her, and going to, at the time we developed a motto, eat, work, and play with the community, and really getting embedded in the community and going to weddings, going to Buddhist ceremonies at the temple, doing home visits, really was something that really at the time anchored us in the community and helping to people to learn to get to trust us. And so back, I would say back then at that time, we were doing something that's now very widely recognized, but it was really the decolonization of mental health. And I say that because we modeled our service after the Harvard program in refugee trauma, which are, you know, my respect for that group. They are pioneers in the field of research in mental health with mass survivors of mass violence. And it was really important to be able to anchor ourselves, and the work, the way that we practice it was very non-traditional and, you know, just off the beaten path of traditional Western psychotherapy. And when you decolonize mental health or healthcare or other areas, you're really acknowledging and respecting and integrating other communities' sense of spiritualism, their religious practices. You're looking at power inequities, and so we've been together with primary care doctors in family medicine, integrating, which is now called BHIP, right? We do it. But Montefiore actually at that time in the 90s was a very progressive institution. And this was work that was cutting edge, really. And now people talk about it, but this work has been being done from, you know, over 30 years ago. And unfortunately, you know, not bad-mouthing Montefiore, but there's a departure from practice of what Montefiore used to be and how they practice, you know, now. And so again, it was a real collaborative approach with family practice doctors. Family practice doctors did home visits all the time. There was projects all the time, and it was just a different time. But it's allowed us the honor of following, which is very unique in itself, of following a community from the inception when they're, like in terms of age, from their 20s all the way now up till their 80s. And that's, you know, that's a real honor and privilege to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm talking too much, and I actually want to hand it over to my colleague and who's also a founding member. I'm also a founding member of and former board member of Macon, New York City, which is a social justice organization in the Bronx. But I've known Cameron as a young person, as a teenager, doing community organizing. So it's a privilege for me to be able to share space and hold space with him and at the temple. So thank you.
Thank you, Min.
Yeah.
And I also want to just a lot of appreciation to our venerable monks that are giving us the space here. This is a very important moment, and a lot of appreciation for folks to be in this space. So just to, you know, uplift a lot of the things that Joyce just shared. Next year we actually mark the 50th anniversary of the wars in Southeast Asia, and so, you know, that lineage of secret bombings, the Vietnam War, inception of Khmer Rouge, all of those things are very much integral in thinking about what the Southeast Asian community looks like and how did they continue to be impacted by war, genocide, intergenerational trauma. And a lot of our work comes very at that intersection, really understanding that in order for us to work with traumatized community, you also have to organize in a healing and holistic way. So a quick little history for me, to Ming Joyce. I actually got started in the early 2000s as a youth organizer, at the same time when the wave of refugee resettlement of Southeast Asian folks that came to the United States and came and resettled in the Bronx, literally where this temple is and this 5-mile radius is the center of where a lot of Cambodian Vietnamese refugees came and resettled. And over the years, you hear about a lot of the resources and support that was infused at that moment. That's when you heard around the Indo-Chinese Mental Health Clinic that was built and established by Montefiore at the Family Health Center at 193rd and Creston. And it was an important institution space. Even though we, a lot of families came during the early 80s in that wave of leaving war-torn genocide and then coming to the Bronx in the crack epidemic and the drug epidemic, when the Bronx was burning, you can see a lot of the things that were going on politically, socially, economically. It was just not investment in the communities that were here. And oftentimes you had other communities of color really just fighting for scraps and really, conflicting in those things. But the Bronx Temple like this, the Family Health Center at 193rd, really stabilized the community, right? Those were safe spaces that community can come to. It was very open door policy for folks to come in and support. At that same time, when the Family Health Center was working, Joyce Umsara, also founding board member from Mekong, a lot of the work was like really integral of building the community, making sure they're at their every moment and every need. At that same time, in the late 80s, there was a Pan-Asian organization in the city called CAV. If you know CAV, Organizing Neighborhood, Committee Against Anti-Asian Violence at the time, that was the old name, but now Organizing Asian Communities, wanted to start a youth program for Southeast Asian young folks in the Bronx. And so it was like, what are some of the things that we can acknowledge and really interject our young space, like for young folks to be a part of it. So that's actually where the child executive director and a lot of other young Southeast Asian folks started to really come together and learn about, okay, how can we really acknowledge what's going on in the space that we're here in the Bronx? What are the issues? What are the systems of oppressions? What are the conditions that we're living with that is actually impacting our everyday life? While also going back home and understanding that we ourselves are dealing with intergenerational trauma, our parents are still unwell, trying to get them along the service of like supporting them at their needs, right? So there's so many things that are played when you deal with Southeast Asian community. So from the late 90s all the way to the 2000s, it was really trying to not only assimilate the community, right, but it's also understanding that this community have so much to give. Like one of the things that you see here is like welcoming folks to sit down and have a meal, right? That is such a culture stuff for our folks. And culture and practice and rituals and spirituality and religion is one of those things that tie folks back to the motherland, right? And it really ties community together. You heard the Venerable Gandala shared earlier around like what are some of those practices and principles of Buddhism, right? Compassion, love, joy, happiness. But then understanding like you can't combat violence and hate and fear with hate and fear. And a lot of our work and community work that we do is from like love. It is from being able to acknowledge what is the work that needs to happen in a way that we're calling people, community and family in. So we're actually making the effort of healing them. So a lot of that organizing effort with, working with the Family Health Center, all these young folks that are coming together and are energized. I got, introduced because my aunties were working with a bunch of the young folks in the late 90s. I came in the early 2000s and I was just like, really, really struck at like, holy shit, there's like Southeast Asian young folks coming together and actually fighting for a cause, fighting for community, fighting for family, fighting for the injustice that we do. Like, we've been here for 45, 50 plus years, but it feels like the conditions that we're still living in are very much the same when folks came and resettled in the early 80s. And we're just a small sliver of, the big melting pot of what the Bronx is, and other communities of color that are also experiencing those waves of resettlement, right? At the same breath of when we see Southeast Asian folks coming into the Bronx, we also saw a wave of South Asian folks. We saw a wave of African communities that were coming in. And so a lot of those same systems that were impacting the Southeast Asian communities in the early 80s are very much the same systems and mechanisms that impact us. So then, quick fast forward to 2011, 2010, a lot of the organizers at the time, a lot of the community leaders, Joyce, our monks, came together and was like, there needs to be more, there has to be more than what we can offer for the community. And that came the inception of us like holding focus groups, doing these surveys with community members and envisioning what would a center that can meet the needs of community can look like. Providing direct service and advocacy, centering our healing and organizing work through arts and culture, right? Passing down heritage, passing down rituals, but also understanding the section of like community organizing. Not only do you have to fight and build community power and fight for self-determination, we also have to make sure we're bringing community along for that fight, right? And so that's why Mekong 3 areas of work is those 3, right? Direct service and advocacy, arts and culture, and community organizing. So in 2011, 2012, we officially launched Mekong NYC with the vision of building a community center. And that really shifted a lot of our thinking of like, we need to demand more, we need to organize for more, we can do more for our community. And so it was beyond just resettling, but how do we really acknowledge the dignity and value of our community in a way that we're now fighting forward and really thriving and building off of the resiliency that we see our folks all the time. And so over the years, it was like, how do we work and fight for our community while also understanding the mental illness component of it? So our work with Family Health Center was so important and vital, you know, with the leadership of Ming Joyce Umsara and the many, many residents, Dr. O'Connell, OG folks that's been here fighting for the community for a very long time, that passion and love, and seeing that intersection of how can healthcare providers and healthcare institutions also acknowledge that there is such a like bigger and broader component to like what social justice looks like for communities that are impacted by these kind of harms. And just to name some of the current work that Mekong is doing, so one, that vision of creating a community center, we're actually one step closer to that. So we're actually in the process of potentially buying a physical space to call our own Mekong Center. So for a long time we've been renting space, we've been sharing in one office space, now having some, you know, some more rooms and doors to share. Now we're actually in the process of raising funds to build an institutional center here in our Bronx. The other piece is our work that continues to happen. We do a lot of health justice work. So not only you know, fighting and advocating for more resources to all the direct service and advocacy work that we do, uplifting, you know, fighting for universal health care, just to name a few, but on the ground work that we do with community partners like the Family Health Center. We also do anti-deportation work because of that history of understanding you know, the impacts of the wars in Southeast Asia and understanding those systems of oppression that Joyce shared around how do, you know, criminalization of Black and brown folks also impact communities of color, impacting Southeast Asian folks, all get interweaved because we're all facing those same conditions. So, you know, for the last 20 plus years, we've been also fighting to bring back Southeast Asian folks that have been deported to Southeast Asia. So actually next year, again, the 50th anniversary is also very tied to that campaign. We also do a lot of organizing through our nail salon organizing, working with workers and owners to, you know, fight for better working conditions in the sectors. We also do a lot of community work on the ground here. You know, working with a lot of other Southeast Asian organizations around the country, but then also Black and brown community in the Bronx, fighting for racial justice, economic democracy. That Kingsbridge Armory, I don't know if folks have seen, that's not too far away from here. That's been a fight in the community for over 30 years. It's the largest physical armory in like the world, I believe. It's like 4 football fields square footage wide, like that's how big that space is. And the community's been fighting to use that to create shared wealth and community ownership. Back to the health justice piece of the work. You know, over the years, I mean, Joyce talked about, you know, some of the shifts that's been happening in Montefiore. You know, in the beginning, in the early 80s, a lot of the resources that were provided through the Inter-Chinese Mental Health Clinic was very tied to a lot of the funding that was given at the time, right? So over the years, when you don't have a program that's also invested in through larger systems, right, of operations, things get cut, right? So before, when there were Southeast Asian interpreters and staff, it got cut over the years. Then the amount of, you know, hours for mental health services also started to get slashed over the years. And at the time, you know, during the 2000s, 2010s, it was at a point where it was being cut from 5 days to 3 days to, I believe it was 1 day a week.
One day.
1 day a week of designated time for mental health support for Southeast Asian community. And over the years, it has been like a a tug of war and working relationship with Montefiore. At times there were highs when we were working together to try to create better conditions, better support and resources to address those language needs and capacity needs. But then also it was like really addressing the shift that was happening in mental health, right? In psychiatry and what that looks like. And so more recently, a few years ago, there was a big fight that came about called a campaign that was launched called Save the Family Health Center. So a few years ago,
2 years maybe.
well, a few years from the shift. So when the original Indo-Chinese mental health clinic was at 193rd and Creston there was going to be a move to Fordham One Plaza. And that in itself was a big fight because we talked about accessibility, we talked about this now being a government building, people had to go through metal detectors, show IDs. Now you're not creating that atmosphere and tone of care when someone walks in, especially when you have communities that are, dealing with mental illness. When we launched the Safe Family Health Center, what we heard was, and please support from Dr. Laurie Joyce, it was 3 community clinics. It was Family Health Center, it was Williamsbridge, and it was Grand Concourse. And what we found out was there was a whole big decision that was made in Montefiore executive spaces, and it was how do we cut costs and save money? Coming out of the pandemic and really understanding what are some of the things that we need to do to save resources and money. And the decision was made to close down Grand Concourse Health Center and then move those staff into Family Health Center and into Williamsbridge Family Center. And those, so that was about 2-3 years ago, right? 2 years ago.
Right, Dan?
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years ago, yeah.
2 years ago.
And just to clarify that, it was to close the Grand Concourse, move those staff and physicians
Consolidate.
into the Family Health Center, and take the Family Health Center physicians who had been there and move them to Williamsbridge. And so, and part of the reason behind that was they felt the Grand Concourse Clinic was seeing more patients, I think because of the different model of how they go about patient care. And both Family Health and Williamsbridge are FQHCs, meaning they get more reimbursement per patient. And so the idea is that we can make more money if we had those Grand Concourse providers who just are training out patients in one of the FQHCs, and we can just push those doctors who've been in that community for generations into Williamsbridge.
Yes, everything Dr. Marty said. And so it was a struggle but it was also a space of healthcare providers, residents, doctors, staff, nursing, students also coming together and advocating we cannot close with the potential closing of Grand Concourse Center and then shifting and moving resources and consolidating 3 clinics into 2. We already saw what the impact can look like, right? We already talk about how healthcare professionals and providers are already dealing with overstaff, right? Under capacity, under resources, especially hearing some of the horror stories from the pandemic and COVID, right? You see the impact and the brunt of what healthcare providers hold, right? Doctors and nurses and healthcare providers. And so it was we knew that we needed to step in and intervene and really organize community in that effort. So we reached out to elected officials to write letters of support, making sure that this consolidation didn't happen, also making sure that the Family Health Center wasn't going to close as part of that consolidation. And it was a lot of energy and effort. We did, op-eds, we spoke with a lot of, reporting, and there was a lot of organizing effort and energy to it. And we were able to actually meet with Montefiore executives, so the CEOs, CFOs, all those suits and ties that are upstairs, just signing checks and smiling at each other. That's another side note. For us, we understood too that there's so much energy and passion of a lot of the residents and healthcare providers and doctors and nurses that really understood that commitment to community, right? Understanding what that looks like when we provide service and care. So, ultimately, the campaign, it wasn't successful. Grand Concourse did eventually get closed down and consolidated. And so we even now here still see the impact of what that looks like, right? Long waiting times for patient, not being able to see their healthcare providers and doctors and primary care. We also see the logistics of trying to get patients to go to the other family health center sites and how complicated that can be. So it's just a whole host of things that I think it was just, plugging an already overpacked system. And then more recently, last year, summer of last year, we actually had a horrifying news. One of our longtime community member, and folks probably seen this all over the news, actually passed away and was found dead in Family Health Center stairwell. And this was like a big stun to all of us, especially for the healthcare providers that were there. When we found out, so we, rapidly came together and figured like, what the heck happened? How does something happen like that? You have a community member who's a long-time patient at Family Health Center that suffers from mental illness, and for something like that to happen without any proper notice or procedures, it was such a big tailspin. And so Mekong, a lot of the other local community organizations and partners and allies, a lot of the healthcare providers and professionals, doctors and nurses came all together and really try to hold Montefiore accountable. We did a big action in front of Montefiore Fordham Plaza and really talked about the impact, right? How such a big institution that talks about social justice medicine and talks about how we want to, save the Bronx and provide care, also, shows some very horrible practices in that case. And so those are just some of the, more recent and big fighting cases that we've had over the years of Montefiore. But I do want to, acknowledge that the work that continues to happen, the relationship that continues to happen with Mekong, with the Southeast Asian community, with Montefiore residents, doctors, staff, nursing, and healthcare providers, has always still been very, very committed and very much, understanding of the needs of the Southeast Asian community. And so I hope that this, give you a sense of what it looks like understanding the history and context of working with Southeast Asian community members, working with community like refugee and immigrant communities that come from, a history of violence, war, and genocide, and understanding, what are some of the things that are necessary to providing the type of care that we would all want to see. So, yeah.
Can I make a brief comment?
Yes.
about what Kevin just said?
Yes, please.
If I can make a brief comment, I think you summarized all the complexity of the relationship with the large institution. And just to acknowledge again, Oster and Joyce, I think of as just an amazing team of advocates who both work within the institution, but also work with the community activist groups. And sometimes the corporate medical institution is supportive because they want to show how much they're doing for the community. And sometimes they're against it because they say, we have these other plans, why are you doing this? This idea didn't come from us. Like, this isn't part of our business plan. We're not interested in this, right? And sometimes they're neutral. Like, okay, you're doing the work, it's not hurting our business plan, we're going to let you do your work. And the incredible skill that Joyce has had in working with Mekong, working with Montefiore, and to continue to advocate, right? And I think Cameron summarized so well the complexity of Mekong's complex relationship with Montefiore, the need to challenge it, and then the complexity for Montefiore's employees, and also at the privilege of positions, sometimes more than other employees. And other employees get a much harder time if they challenge the institutions because of how the hierarchy works. And physicians sometimes have a little more leeway to step up and challenge. And the importance of occasionally when folks from Mekong or Joyce would ask us, can you support us in this, the importance of allying and helping to support the requests.
Any comments, questions, or feelings that come up that you'd like to share or ask? Akua? Is Akua back there? Do you want to make a comment or say anything? I'm sorry.
I will add that, like, the work that Mekong has done is always, first of all, it's always great being welcomed into the space, and I'm always just humbled and grateful for, the the love and the nourishment that we receive. With regards to Mekon's work, I'm always, what's the word I'm looking for? Just proud of like the level of inclusivity that you guys have, because like y'all have a very unique experience, right? You know, not when it comes to the oppression, but as far as like the story of, you know, your Cambodian refugees and things like that. And I've always appreciated the level of inclusivity and like you guys are out in tackling like anti-blackness and all that jazz, whether it's in your deportation work, your clemency work, and just really being able to bring so many of us together. Because like, so I just, that's something that always like, I guess, makes me proud and makes me, it kind of takes me aback a little bit, because whenever we are organizing together, it always feels like, and we had a session earlier on like solidarity and one on collective liberation, and I feel like Mekon has always like represented that really well. That's what I have.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you again for welcoming us into this space. I have a question. I guess I understand in the abstract, like, it's obviously important to decolonize healthcare, especially mental health. I guess I'm curious to understand, like, what does decolonized mental health practice look like to you, kind of like in a more tangible, day-to-day sense?
So for us, for our practice, Usara, who is the mental health worker, a decolonized practice is, I'm not Khmer, I'm not Cambodian, I don't speak Khmer, and so it's having had a mental health worker from the community that's been trained, that is my co-therapist. So every session that I have, you know, most of the community members that I treat, that I've been following through the life cycle, the diagnoses have been major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. So those sessions, at the beginning when we first started, including the monks, let's say for rituals, Cambodian culture is rich in rituals, in Buddhist rituals, going to the hospital and doing a home visit for somebody sick, and the monks coming to the hospital and integrating them as part of the healing. We used, in my old office on 193rd Street, we used to have a Buddha in the office, and so sometimes at the end of a session we would end it with chanting to the Buddha as part of meditation. Having rituals around music, around food. Women's, we did it was a small research study that we did on a Cambodian women's wellness circle, but it's to encourage the emotional, to continue to develop and foster the emotional resiliency of Cambodian women. And just being in the community. So I know as residents, this is not something, especially in family medicine, something that was encouraged was going out into the community. And you know, it's not anybody's fault that productivity standards are off the charts and off the roof, and you don't get to come out of your office and you have 15 minutes with patients. It's so challenging. But even in that space, you know, coming together and talking about what is being culturally, I don't want to say sensitive, culturally competent, what does that look like for the communities that you work with? And so getting involved in the communities and going out in the neighborhoods and walking around and really listening with cultural humility and cultural naivete is really important in connecting with the communities that you serve. So just the fact that Usara, the mental health worker, is my co-therapist, that goes along the hierarchical structure of what Western psychotherapy is, right? Because we sharing power in the office. It's not like, oh, I'm the therapist and she's the mouthpiece. It's not at all like that. She's very well trained. She's included. I'll ask her, what are your opinions? What do you think about this community member that's coming in, about what she's saying? And it's a very team team approach. What else?
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
Another piece to think about is when you think about medicine. When you think about medicine, oftentimes it's around how do you, with someone dealing with mental illness, it's like how do you prescribe medicine? How do you prescribe the pills, right? And one of the things that I know that was very challenging was like community members would come into the office and then they'll dump their bags and have like 10, 20 different type of medicines that they were taking. And they didn't know what to take at what time, and it was just all mixed up. And so like really understanding that was one form and one structure of providing care. I know one of the things that we talked about, that we advocated for actually at Family Health Center at 193rd was like, how do we provide, is there a way that we can do like alternate type of care, right? Can we start bringing in some of the cultural ways that we provide care and healing, such as acupuncture, coining, steaming? What are some of the things that we can introduce into, what we're taught in Western medicine into a more culture sensitive space that is actually more of a cultural norm for us? Like when you have a cold and you're not feeling too good, maybe I should do some coining to just relieve some of the toxins that are in my body. And then folks will walk around with like red marks all over their bodies and be like, did you get beat? Like what happened? So there's like a lot of like that component that's tied to it around the type of care and shifting what that can look like. And now it's also like super commercialized. Like you see yoga therapy, like all of these things. Massage therapy has been, very commercialized and taken for granted around the type of care and the history of where that comes from. So part of like the decolonization of it is like, how do we take those things back? What are the cultural norms and cultural practices that we do in our communities, that we do back home, that we can introduce in our everyday way of us providing care?
Yes, and also when you come from a background of forced displacement, there's also like a sense of loss of identity, and so as Kamaran said, in the work that we've done, is encouraging their own healing practices. And so when you would, or using a kukamai, which is a traditional healer that has remedies to help with whatever ailment that you have. So like in many Latino cultures that practice Santeria, which is an African religion, and if you don't give your patient the space to ask, where else do you go for healing, or listen to what they're doing also, right? You're not that's not decolonization of mental health. It's really being open and asking, and many times, sometimes, especially with social workers, I see it with primary care doctors. They'll say, "Oh, the patient didn't tell me any of that," and so the response is, "Did you ask?" Right? And it's really this is what it means. Also, a trauma-informed approach, that you're asking about trauma, that you're asking about torture. Have you ever been tortured? You'd be surprised how, and there's, that's another topic, but the effects of torture, the sequela of torture on a person. And so if you don't ask about it, I can guarantee you it's, people talk about it now, childhood, what's it called now? I can't think.
Adverse childhood events?
Thank you, childhood adverse events, and the importance of talking about, domestic violence, about sexual abuse. There's so many topics that if you really don't ask, they're not gonna talk about it. But what else? Yes, please.
So I think, Canada did a really wonderful job of explaining Mekong's history of working and organizing the Southeast Asian community. I think there's two things that I wanted to emphasize and uplift. I think one is that, I know we're talking a lot today about the Cambodian community in the Bronx, that's the community that, Khmer, Anna, and I come from as like, Cambodian refugees or like the children of like Cambodian refugees. But in terms of Mekong's vision and our work, we actually work with the broader Southeast Asian refugee community, which also includes people who came here from Vietnam and Laos as well. And so in terms of like, the people who came from the three countries of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, there's a shared identity there in terms of like being Southeast Asian refugees, where we were all affected by U.S. militarism in Southeast Asia. We were brought to the U.S. as part of the largest refugee resettlement program in the United States history, even to this day. And then our community members faced like the failed refugee resettlement program, as well as like systemic poverty, systemic criminalization, as well as like the deportation crisis that affects our community today. So I just wanted to highlight that for us, like there's a political definition of Southeast Asian refugee that includes people from Cambodia as well as like people from Vietnam and Laos, and that this political identity is really important for us in terms of like naming how we came to this country and the systems that have affected like our community members even to this day. So that was one thing I wanted to highlight. The other thing I want to highlight is that we talk about how our community members face like displacement 40-something years ago, but I think for our overall Southeast Asian community, including our community here in the Bronx, there's a cycle of instability, displacement, and violence that continues to affect our community even to today. So, our people fled Southeast Asia 40 years ago, but even here, today, like, in, communities like the Bronx, our community members continue to face, like, a number of different forms of, like, violence and, these systems that really destabilize our communities. And so I think deportation is, like, another form of that. So, Khmer mentioned earlier that, Mekong does a lot of work around deportations, and, we've had the privilege of working with the KUA and CAR around, like, doing our deportation work, and this includes the Clemency Coalition, which is a state-based campaign that is focused on ending deportations. And it not only includes, like, the Southeast Asian community, but it's a multiracial coalition that also includes people from like the Latinx community, people from the African and Afro-Caribbean community who also face deportation and the carceral systems. But I think my point is that, for our community, like there's an ongoing sort of like cycle of like instability, displacement, family separation, and violence that even continues to face our community members today, 40 years after our people initially arrived as refugees. And so that for us is like an important reminder of like why our work is really important and the need for, the organizing work that Mekong does. So that's it. Sounds like 2 cents.
I guess it's something else to highlight, and I think what actually even drew me to Montefiore, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the old Family Health Center and highlight the idea specifically of what it means to have a clinical space that supports the community. If you think about our clinics now, like I can speak from Williamsburg, the current FHC, right, you can't really come in unless you have a direct reason to be there for a visit, right? There's a security guard right there. Like when I used to precept at Fordham, when the residents were at that new Family Health Center, like I couldn't even go into precept residence without showing my ID and signing the paper of why I was there. Versus the old Family Health Center, where they would regularly have like after hours like spaces for the community to come in. They did like, things that for free. So things like I remember seeing Zumba classes, seeing weight management classes, seeing exercise classes, acupuncture, and these weren't visit based. Like there's nothing was being billed. You'd have to pay. You'd have to sign it. You just could these are the times. Come if you want to do it. Juan Robles, Dr. Robles had kind of created this Bronx Community Health Leaders Program for kind of youth in the Bronx who are interested in healthcare as a way to, as a pipeline program, and a lot of times they'd be the ones to run the groups, and just kind of imagine like looking what a true space for the community could look like. And I think when you even think of how the Family Health Center even started doing work with, I think, the Cambodian community was because realizing, there's this group in the community that needs the resources, how can we go out there and provide that services for them? And I don't know today how easily that would happen today and the way our clinics are set up now. So when we start thinking of what a decolonized space actually looks like, I think that's what I think about, like how easy is it for a community, for us to do work in community spaces if we don't even let people in unless they have a direct reason, monetary wise, to be there for us.
That's that's something that pains me as someone who's seen the shift in practice and how they practice medicine, and the campaign that Khmer worked on 2 years ago when they consolidated the Grand Concourse Clinic. You know, I miss, truly, it pains me and saddens me. I miss my family medicine colleagues. It's really, Montefiore's decision to consolidate was a divestment of primary care in the Bronx. You know, there's a lack of primary care doctors, and why should one clinic that is internal medicine, and no shade to internal medicine amongst you, but just internal medicine that is not trained in social medicine, their approach, it's a complete departure of what our family medicine colleagues that are so patient-centered and follow families through a life cycle, to see them now like take over our clinic and to have patients that don't have follow-up care, that don't have a family practice doctor anymore. They can't make it to get to the Williamsbridge Clinic, and when our clinic was a hub of, it was life, you know, it was residents, precepting, and so many projects, and it was really community based. So it's been hard these last 2 years working at the clinic with a new group of people that have nothing to do with our original mission. But here you are, and so you're bringing in new life and new ideas, and you know, we really hope that as you continue your training and your practice, that you'll keep these things in mind, because the historical context is very important, and it adds to what you could do and what you foresee in the future.
Any other questions? Or I think.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming to
I think thank you all so much for having us and for hosting us and clicking for us, and just I think having these important conversations. We've had a very intense month of talking about a lot of these issues and being able to give people context to think about and ideas of what could be and learning about just the different communities as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to Dan also for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
From my yeah, he's still
Left your name on there.
Okay. We want to take a group picture with everyone. Sure. We'll have dance after that too. Where do we want to?
What's the same as before?
They come in here, they sit here. Oh, okay. Yes. I'll take
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll take you guys.
Where do you want us to be?
I think they want us over here, right in front of you.
Okay, I didn't know that. Alright guys, we're all gonna do a picture over there, so please migrate this way.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a deal. Stand by me.
Sit like this, like two roll, close to each other, close to each other. Yeah. Make it two roll, yeah. Cool, make it straight. Like just over there, over there, over there, over there. Cool.
Over there? Here? Okay.
Okay? Ready? I just take a snap, okay? Smile. Don't hold it. There's two more.
Oh.
You ain't good enough.
Got 19 more phones.
Okay, guys. Good one.
You can't just share these pictures with
No
people.
such thing.
We're not into it.
Can you do please like this together?
Put your hands together and
Smile.
done. Shaking hands.
All right. Anybody up? That's right. Well, some of those hands are like this. All right?
Solidarity.
Right, that's something.
Thank you so much. Please. That's weird. I was born here. I can go back. Yeah, I'm helping you. Yeah, last year. Who's dining? Yeah, do you want to think of yeah, he's boarding there. Yeah,
I took all the things on the countertop.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was
Thank you.
same time we close this place and we're gonna back for it. Your brother actually. So everything has a right.
Yeah.
Versus all the other.
I work the children's hospital on Bainbridge.
Is that important?
Grab some groups.
Oh, so both of my parents are Indian, but my dad was born and raised in
Yeah. I was like, they did that. They made that.
I know. Yeah, that's true. I love it. Why did you ask somebody if you
Thank you for the cookies. I know the cookies.